Yeah, so Cosmo will be here in a moment, and then I'll figure out the slideshow. 1 second.
Well, like Serpico, we're sort of playing it by ear here. So my name is Mark Phillips. I run a website called nycinfilm.com. I've spent about 10-15 years working in film as a locations guy, production assistant, and as an actor. And then about 2017, I was going over all these locations when I would discover that, oh, this location is from this movie. I decided, let's sort of document it and sort of focus on New York City, mainly because New York is so rich with history that you find out so much about the history of New York when you're sort of finding a location here. So hopefully we're going to sort of have a few visuals. You can sort of see what some of these locations look like now opposed to back then. I don't know. So we're originally going to do a Q&A, so I'm just A-ing right now. I'll talk a little bit about the movie itself. I got first interested in this movie because I actually happened to live in Frank Serpico's real apartment, not the one that's in the movie, but he actually lived at 116 Perry Street. I actually lived in the apartment right above where he used to live, so I would look into that courtyard, his real courtyard that he would go into. And so that kind of got me interested in the movie in the first place. And that kind of also got me interested in thinking about, real versus R-E-E-L, real versus real. So pretty much everything in this movie, even though the events are pretty accurate, the locations, City Lumet chose basically all new locations for everything, including his apartment, which was on Minetta Street. If you know, Minetta's one of those nice little, classic little cute back street kind of places between 6th Avenue and McDougal. And used to be a creek there, Minetta, and actually supposedly if you actually go there late at night, you can still hear the water below. That's the rumor, but I haven't really decided to go at 2 o'clock in the morning to try to. Also, McDougal's pretty loud, so it's pretty hard to ever find a quiet time. So I don't know if we have the slideshow. It's much better when you sort of see what it looks like. But this is what the Low Cinema looks like. It's 1973, it was black. So what else can I talk about?
I have a question.
Sure.
So, because clearly it's broadened into this being like a theme of your work. Can you talk about like some of the unique challenges since New York changes so frequently? Like, what other techniques do you have on modeling?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting techniques to do. For example, there's the scene where Serpico is learning sort of, I think they're moving when he went to the Bronx, quote unquote, and the guy is taking him into a bar to shake down the gambler guy in the payphone. That was actually shot in the East Village on Avenue A. And the way me and my research partner were able to find it is in the window, you can see a little bit of a word that says crow. And it's backwards, and there was actually a crow in the window. So basically you sort of go backwards from there and sort of figure that out. And then once you get it, you have to try to find ways to confirm it. And so a lot of times what you'll do is if you get a shot out the window, you can try to match up a window like that. There's so many different techniques. A lot of times the best technique is obviously, store signs, because you can usually do a little bit of research on that. Sometimes it's just living in New York. Since I lived in New York since 1989, sometimes you just get the feeling, you're like, oh, I know what that is.
Yeah.
That's LaGuardia. That's the techniques that we use for this and of course with Google Street View, that is probably one of the best inventions for location hunters, which is that definitely there's a subgroup of location hunters out there, who like to try to find these little nooks and crannies. I just did Taxi Driver, and that was like, equal number of just different locations, and you have to use so many different techniques to find them there. Any other questions maybe someone might have? Sure.
I had a kind of a specific question about Serpico.
Sure.
Just was wondering if you know the location of when they're in it's like a big auditorium with Greek columns.
Right. Yeah, that was Lewiston Stadium, And that was torn down just after they filmed it, like months after they filmed it. That's why it was kind of like empty and kind of decaying and stuff.
Yeah.
It's actually now where City College is. So up 155th Street and stuff. And again, that was one of those things where you just basically, going back to techniques, is just do a Google search. It's like, okay, Greek-looking stadium, New York City. Sometimes you get lucky, and you kind of got lucky on that. So that was built in 1915. And it was actually used not just for sporting events, but also for a lot of open air theater productions, and they sort of made sure to keep it kind of cheap. So it was kind of a nice sort of cheap option for New Yorkers to go there. So that was kind of, something's happening. So the rumor is that they used 104 unique locations for this movie, which is kind of, incredible. Although I think that it's one of those things where it's a little bit kind of like hype that they like to do for the movie, where they want to say, 104, 4 out of the 5 boroughs are used. And like Bronx, they have one shot in the Bronx, that was it. And I think a lot of times what if you ever worked on a film, it's like when you figure out a location, part of the problem is trying to figure out, okay, how can I use a location here, and then a block away, use it here, because you have a base camp, and you don't want to necessarily have to go do a company move every single time you want to do a new scene. So you try to figure out, for example, when he's talking to the chief in the fingerprinting lab, they're walking, that's on Grand Avenue, near the headquarters, they're on Center Street. And then they have another later scenes on a phone booth, and that's actually right there on Center and Broome right there. And then there's another scene that they do right down on Center Marketplace, which is right behind the headquarters where the gun shop is. So they use 3 different scenes, and also they use the interior of that as well. So you have basically you have 4 different locations, which really is one. So it's like you have a little bit of fun with the idea of 104. But certainly he used a lot. And just a little background that on the first day of shooting, Lumet purposely chose to do 3 different company moves on the first day, and that was basically to sort of figure out who in the crew could handle, because he likes to move really fast, and he was one of these things where he knew he actually was he was hired after the original John G. Avildsen, who directed Rocky, Karate Kid. He was friends with Frank Serpico, and they were working together with Peter Maas, who wrote the book, to work on it, and he actually just was not meeting the producer's needs, and they basically tricked him into quitting 4 weeks before rehearsal started. So Lumet really did not have a lot of time to sort of leap in there. So, figure out the locations, working with the actors, everything, and actually reshaping the script. All of this was done in there's stuff in there. All right. So here we go. Here's a little rough map. If we can go up, I don't know if someone can control that. So you can see this is kind of all the locations that I was able to confirm, and you can see that's not 104. Hey, and here's Cosmo. And that's not 104, but definitely, like I said, a lot of these dots would have about 4 different sort of usages, in there. I even included that. That would be the Brooklyn Bridge when he's singing to himself. So,
Mark, you can say just like next slide, and then I'll.
Okay, we'll do next slide. So we'll just move along. Oh, and also, interesting thing is, they actually shot it in reverse chronological order. They actually started with him with the beard, the long hair. And of course that makes sense because then they could trim away and basically go backwards to find the last stuff they shot and they were able to have completely clean shaven and the short haircut. There we go. That's what it is today, and today and back in 1973. And again, the clue that I worked off was Grand. You can see Grand there on the street sign. So you basically figure out, all right, that was probably a real precinct. So you figure out precincts on Grand. You figure it was most likely Brooklyn. And just a little bit of looking around. It actually was a disused precinct at the time. And once again, not the place that the real Frank Serpico went to. And we'll go to the next one. And this, this is Thomas Jefferson Park up on the sort of East Harlem. And what's interesting about that is once they figured out this location, it helped me figure out several other locations. Because there's some where you're basically just seeing like a brick wall, and you're not really seeing very much. But once this gets confirmed, we'll go to the next slide. you'll see this rape scene was shot at the Manhattan Center for Science and Mathematics, which is right there on Pleasant Avenue, which is like 1 block north of the park. So once I was able to discover what the park was, I'm like, oh, look at this building here. This looks like it could be the same building right there. So it was used for the rape scene as well as for the graduation scene. Again, never would have been able to figure these things out if I hadn't figured out that park in the first place. And here's another one, which is, I just sort of showed this. This was actually just the confirmation for the shoe shop, the family shoe shop. So it's just one of those things where you sort of think you figured it out, and then you want to find those confirmation things. So nothing worse than throwing out wrong information on the web, because that never happens. So once I was able to find this, I was pretty happy. You can see the next slide, and you can see right there, these moldings are really wonderful. It's like, you go in New York, as you know, it's always changing, but the building hasn't been demolished. Most of the time, they save these little vertical wooden frames, which is just always so wonderful, and of course, easy to be able to help confirm, because they're always usually just slightly unique. I mean, they have a lot of times the same sort of, that flower thing. I'm always wondering why that was a wonderful theme there. But anyways, we just go up. It's a bar now, nothing too exciting, but it's one of the few sort of interiors, if you will. And it's one of these, again, one of these puzzles where it's like, oh, we knew where Serpico's family real shoe shop was, which was in Brooklyn, but this was on the Upper West Side. And the clue was, it's in the frame before, but the clue was the number 688, which is on the door. So basically, again, they're using a little bit of logic. It's probably a real location, it's probably a real 688, and then you see kind of open sky, so you figure, well, it's probably either on the west or on the east side of the island. So, because there's not a lot of buildings in the background, so you're probably near a river. So these are all sort of clues. And there's Minetta. What's interesting about that too is for about 10 years, this was all covered in scaffolding. And basically only like 6 months ago, the scaffolding came down. So I immediately had to go back there and get a picture of it sort of unencumbered with all that stuff. And what's interesting about this, you can actually see the same little indentation in the brick right there. So those little details always kind of get you kind of excited when you can sort of see. This is cool too. It's the Ditmars Boulevard in Queens, one of the Queens locations. Again, just a really cool to be able to, that the arcade is still open there. It's kind of a unique feature there. And here we are on 57th Street. This is kind of unique in the sense that if you see a subway scene in a movie, most likely it's going to be on the shuttle, and the 42nd Street shuttle, or a couple other locations that have usually, like Hoyt Skimmermore is another one in Brooklyn that's very popular because it has a platform that's not used anymore. So a lot of times these stations, they use them so they don't have to ruin, the flow of subways. They can just use the platform and not disrupt service. But this actually was a real it was a functioning platform, but I'm assuming it's because they don't go on the subway car in that scene. They're just getting stoned and getting potato chips. And there's the stadium that we were talking about before. And there's a stadium there that's now there. So getting those sort of overhead shots are always a little bit difficult. And so most of the interiors I wasn't able to confirm, but this is one of the few ones I was able to confirm, the famous lobster chomping scene, whatever that was. So when he's talking about, getting the money there. So this was in a place called Sirkins on Park, there you go, on Park Place. And this was the clue. We found this, actually my research partner, Blake Slade, was able to find this. It was a little tiny 1-inch ad in New York Magazine that is saying, yep, you saw us in Serpico. That is, I guess, the draw, they thought. And it's one of those things where it didn't say what scene they were doing, but you sort of figured that it was. And that's what it is now. It's all been gutted, and it's been actually gutted. This was taken in around 2020, and it's still gutted there, but they are making some progress. So again, this is just another, this is just to show you. This is the Upper West Side. It's like Amsterdam and 150th Street. And again, it's just kind of cool that some of these little elements are still there. And then we got the Meatpacking District, which you probably know. On the next slide, you'll probably recognize this as the sort of the triangle building. Yeah, you have a question?
I was really thinking about this red building.
Yeah.
do you think it was red to begin with, and that's part of why they picked it, or do you think they picked a spot and said, can we paint this building red for our film?
This one,
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that was red at the time.
It was red.
In fact, Lynette made a point of saying, I didn't want to choose a location that we'd have to change. We wanted the scene to dictate the scene.
Because I know sometimes they actually make like more than cosmetic
Yeah.
alterations, but then teams do make cosmetic alterations like paint.
Sure, yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon, but also you gotta think, they did this in 51 days,
Right.
which is an amazing shooting schedule. Like I
Yeah,
said,
crazy.
most of the time, one or two company moves during the day, and that's a lot of stuff. And also, he would do usually one take. If it's like a scene of Pacino walking into like the gun shop, he's like not any protection, and the crew would be like, maybe the second one? No, we got it. This is all we got. Let's move. And here's the place I was telling you about before. This was called Crow's Rest, which was kind of an after-hours gambling place. It later became Brownies. I don't know, any East Villagers know Brownies. That was kind of an underground rock place. It's now turning into a country music bar. So it's on Avenue A, 169 Avenue A. And you can see, I think it might be the same one. Oh, there you go. There's the exterior right there. So it was also called High Five for a couple decades there. Here's our One Bronx location, and of course, as you can see, I'm sure he chose it. This is Joyce Kilmer Park in the Bronx, and I'm sure he chose it because it's the shot where you can see right into Yankee Stadium. He just wanted to have something that said, if you're gonna see the Bronx, that's probably the one landmark you're gonna use. What I thought was also intriguing is that things to the right look like another stadium. I don't know if you see that right there. But actually, it's just a little tiny liquor store that obviously was just trying to mimic the stadium thing. But it's just one of those things where you don't have that depth perception, in a movie. So it looked like it could have been something gigantic, but it was just a corner place there. This is over in Queens by the Hell's Gate Bridge near Ward's Island. And I showed this because it's a great example to show how a tree can grow over time. Usually you don't get that wide shot, you don't really see that height difference going on there, so that's just kind of fun. This is a 7B. Again, any East Villagers, you probably know this bar pretty well. It's on the corner of Avenue B and 7th by Tompkins Square Park. Been used in a million movies, TV shows, Law and Order. You saw Russian Doll, the first season of Russian Doll. That was the bar that she started every single Groundhog Day with. So this was, again, you can always tell by those colored windows. And I just showed this to show the different businesses that change over the years. So it's kind of just fun to see what became what. The cleaners becoming a laundromat. I think it might be kind of like that. This is again, nothing too exciting. It's 125th Street. We're underneath the Metro North station there, but it was kind of interesting because the stand was called Coney Island, so I immediately thought, oh, this must be in Coney Island. But no, it was 125th Street. And here we are on 10th. This is right around the corner from actually Serpico's real apartment on Perry Street. It was one of those locations, again, I just knew it because I lived 2 blocks away, so as soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh, okay, that street, I know that. Now a bomb squad is where that is. This is just cool, again, just to sort of show how some of the architecture just really does not change over the years. It's just kind of amazing. This is on the, again, near 150th Street. And here's the gun shop. And this was actually, the Jovino gun shop is still there. Not at that location, but they still actually have a gun shop around the corner on Grand. But what's cool about that is this was on, like I said, Center Marketplace, which is basically this little side alley behind the police headquarters near Broome. And this was all lined with sort of like police-related kind of businesses. So one of the few places where they actually had gun ranges and such. Now we're getting towards the end. This is over on Driggs in Williamsburg there. You can see that is still there, and that's the elevated train there.
Is it like the M?
That's the M, where you take the M,
Yeah,
M there.
Yeah.
It goes to Broadway. You got
It's like right near Marcy Ave?
it's near, oh geez, now I'm blanking on the steakhouse that's there.
Yeah.
Luger?
Yes,
Yes,
Luger's right
yes,
by
yes,
Luger's,
yes, yes.
Yes, so it's right there.
The 1-star steakhouse?
Yes.
It was 4 back then, so. And here's another example just showing the building they used. This is where the shooting took place. That's the one they used in the movie. That's the real one. That one has gotten demolished, but the one that Serpico really got shot in was right there. And that's the actual crime scene photo right there. But you can see that they chose a pretty similar looking, door configuration. I don't know exactly why they chose a different place, but it's pretty cool. And here we go, the ending here, which is in the Grand Hall at the Commerce Building down in Lower Manhattan there. This is the only location that when he was speaking at the NAP committee, that's the same location. They actually used the same location. So as far as you can tell, that's the only place that really matched reality. And you might recognize it from the movie Trading Places. That's where Dan Aykroyd gets accused of stealing at the private club there. Yeah, very good. And one last thing, I just want to show same phone booth, two different locations. So clearly they would just use a little prop phone booth. When I was able to match up the little red paint splotches, I was very excited about that. I get excited by little things like that. And I think we're almost done, and that's Pier 86, which is on 46th Street. And here's a little trick. If you ever want to know where a pier is, minus 40 blocks, and that's what you get. So Pier 86 is going to be on 46th Street. Pier 16, then things get trickier there. If you go in the high ones, you just basically take away 40, and that's your cross street. I think that's the last picture. Yeah, that's where the movie ends.
Do you mind if I jump in?
No, jump in, please.
Just wanted to, well, I got here late, so which I'm very sad about because I wanted to introduce you and to have a little Q&A kind of before you got into your presentation, but we'll do that tomorrow night.
Sure, yes.
And this was riveting either way. I just wanted to say, I've been admiring, I'm Cosmo Bjorkenheim. I've been admiring Mark's work on NYC and film for a long time, his meticulous research on these locations, and I was really excited to bring him over here for this, not least because Serpico has so many locations, but also because his sort of deep dive, meticulous approach was really on amazing display in this particular instance. So that's why I was super excited to have him come, and it was cool to talk about. Tomorrow I would love to talk more about Mars Boulevard, Hellgate Bridge, some other kind of Queens locations, since and talk about all 5 boroughs except Staten Island. So sorry, Staten Island, but we unfortunately have to wrap up because we have an 8:30 show starting in like 2 minutes or whatever. So anyway, thank you, Mark. And do check out his website, nycandfilm.com.